All right, so when you think of Godzilla, you think of the roar, right? The city stomping, the pure destruction. But what if I told you there are really two Godzillas? One is this terrifying symbol of nuclear war, and the other? Well, the other is basically a US military asset. And the story of how that monster became a partner, that's the real story we're diving into. And trust me, it's wilder than any on-screen kaiju fight.
It seems like a pretty basic question, doesn't it? But the answer completely depends on which movie you're watching, and maybe more importantly, where it was made. Is Godzilla a punishment for humanity's hubris with the atom bomb, or is he some kind of planetary protector who just happens to team up with the US Navy? The craziest part is, he's been both.
And this really gets to the heart of it. It's like he has this massive identity crisis. On one hand, you've got the original, a walking, breathing symbol of atomic terror, a monster literally born from our worst mistakes. But on the other hand, he's become something else entirely, a kind of living superweapon, a partner to the military. To really understand how deep this change goes, we have to go back, way back. We're talking 1950s Japan, a country that was still living in the very real, very recent shadow of the atomic bomb. See, the original Godzilla wasn't just some random monster movie idea cooked up in a boardroom. It was forged in the atomic anxiety of a nation that knew nuclear devastation firsthand. You had the bombings in 1945, of course, but then in March of 1954, a U.S. hydrogen bomb test irradiated a Japanese fishing boat, the Lucky Dragon No. 5. This was a fresh, terrifying reminder. And just a few months later, Gojira hits theaters. The timing is no accident.
And this is just so key to understanding the original film. The director, Ishiro Honda, he was a pacifist, and he'd actually passed through the ruins of Hiroshima after the war. For him, this wasn't just entertainment. This was his chance to pour all the trauma he'd witnessed, all his anti-war feelings, directly onto the screen. So the first Godzilla movie? It's a horror film. Full stop. He was a punishment, a consequence. His skin was deliberately designed to look like the keloid scars of atomic bomb survivors. And in that movie, the military isn't heroic. They're totally helpless. The movie doesn't end with some big victory. It ends with a really chilling warning. As long as humanity has nuclear weapons, another Godzilla is always a possibility.
Okay, now let's fast forward 60 years. We're jumping to the American reboot, the movie that kicked off the modern monsterverse. And we're about to see how this monster got a complete and total rebuild, starting with a very different kind of partnership. So when Hollywood decided to reboot Godzilla in 2014, they knew they didn't just need CGI. They needed real military hardware. You know, aircraft carriers, destroyers, the whole deal. And the US Department of Defense saw this as a golden opportunity. And it wasn't just about lending out some cool props, it was a chance to shape the story and reach a very specific audience.
So who was that audience? Well, according to the Pentagon officials who worked on the film, they were laser-focused on 14 to 18-year-olds. They saw this massive blockbuster movie as a perfect vehicle to show off the Navy as this sophisticated, professional organization to a whole new generation of potential recruits. So what you get is this powerful, you could say, symbiotic relationship. The filmmakers get access to billions of dollars worth of real military gear, ships, helicopters, even personnel as extras, which gives their movie a ton of production value and perceived realism. And what does the Pentagon get for all this? Script oversight. The power to make sure the military looks competent, heroic, and absolutely essential to saving the day. So how does that oversight actually look? Well, here's a perfect example. In an early draft of the script, the bad guy monster, the Muto, steals an American nuclear weapon. That was a hard no from the military. So in the final movie, the one the Pentagon signed off on, the monster just so happens to steal a Russian nuke instead. And maybe even more telling is this. There was a scene where the Japanese scientist character, Dr. Serizawa, was supposed to talk about his father being a survivor of the Hiroshima bombing. It was cut. The reason? The producers called it a showstopper, which was basically code for the military liaison saying absolutely not. Any direct reference to the ugly, real-world history of the atom bomb, especially America's role, had to go. And look, this deal with Godzilla wasn't some one-time thing.
It's actually part of a much bigger, much more systematic relationship between the Department of Defense and Hollywood that's been going on for decades.
The linguist Noam Chomsky actually has a name for this kind of thing: manufacturing consent. The idea is pretty simple, really. In a democracy, you can't just force people to support your policies. So instead, you have to shape their opinions. And if you embed your message in something really popular, like a Godzilla movie, you can build support for, say, military spending without it ever feeling like you're watching propaganda.
So if you're a filmmaker and you want access to all those shiny jets and aircraft carriers, you've got to play by their rules. And the DoD's rules are very, very clear. Your movie has to show a positive, reasonably realistic military. It has to help with recruitment. And here's the kicker: the Pentagon gets final say on the script.
You can really see this playbook in action when you just look at the movies that it gets support versus the ones that get rejected. Big pro-military blockbusters like Top Gun, Transformers, they get the full red carpet treatment. But films that show military incompetence, like Independence Day, or films about mutiny, like Crimson Tide, nope, support denied. This just shows you how flexible that realism rule is. The movie Jarhead was based on a real Marine's own book, his memoir. But because it showed some of the ugly, psychologically damaging parts of war, the Pentagon refused to cooperate. So it seems realism is only a requirement when it's the right kind of realism.
And you gotta understand, this is a massive, massive operation. We're talking about official support for over 2,500 movies and TV shows over the years. This isn't just a casual thing. It is a vast institutional system designed to shape how we all see the military in our most popular stories.
So this brings everything full circle, right back to Godzilla. And it leaves us with a pretty important question to think about as an audience.
What we've seen here is a total ideological flip. I mean, the character who was born as a warning against nuclear weapons and the futility of military power has been completely transformed. In the American Monsterverse, a nuclear bomb is literally used to revive Godzilla, and he fights side by side with the very same military forces that the original film showed to be totally useless.
And for a lot of critics, this isn't just some innocent story choice. The argument is that by partnering so closely with the Pentagon, these new movies have basically changed the entire message of the franchise, from an anti-war story into a huge, loud promotion of American military might.
So why does any of this matter? Well, the real-world impact is pretty huge. It completely blurs the line between a fun summer blockbuster and a military recruitment ad. It cleans up or just erases difficult parts of history for a global audience, and it helps manufacture consent for massive military budgets by making constant conflict seem necessary, heroic, and frankly, kind of cool. It just leaves you with this one last question. The next time you're watching a giant monster movie and you see all those fighter jets and aircraft carriers perfectly framing the shot, it's worth asking yourself, are you just watching a movie? Or are you watching what might be the most expensive and entertaining military advertisement ever made?